This is a Guide Your Light network production, creating podcasts with purpose.
I did a session maybe 3 months ago, actually, with a beautiful woman who flew over from New Zealand, and she come out of it and was like the thing that had come up for her happened 65 years ago. Like, I have not thought about that for 65 years. Like, it wasn't like a little bit there. She's like, it was almost like I was reliving the situation. And so she was like, I have not thought about that at all for probably a good 30 years.
Welcome to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'm your host, Maritza Barone. Get ready to hear moments that will help you to see the world differently and inspire you to become the happiest, healthiest, and kindest version of you. Hello, welcome to Things You Can't Unhear. How are you today? I'm glad you clicked play on this episode because it's an important one. I got asked recently by a friend who was struggling with some deep, heavy emotional stuff and really wanted to feel lighter. And she approached me and asked what I would suggest were the top two things to really start to improve that mental resilience and do everything possible to feel happier and lighter. And I had a good think about it, and I'm lucky enough to have spoken to so many incredible experts through the course of this podcast and learned from them in so many ways. But for me personally, I think the two biggest things have probably been kinesiology and breathwork. So I suggested those to her, and now she's gone out to try and integrate some of that into her life. And I thought it was important to bring back the breathwork conversation because it has been such a life-changing tool for so many people who perhaps have blocked trauma that they didn't even know about, that present as either physical symptoms or personality traits that perhaps aren't serving them. And breathwork can really be a way to get past that or really start to tap into clearing it in some positive way. So I invited emotional regulation coach Amy Mason to join me for this discussion, to jump into the benefits of breathwork with techniques that will help us enhance our resilience, relieve stress, and promote deep inner calm. Amy has helped thousands of people as a breathwork expert, and today we jump into her story and her journey and her own breakthrough experience where breathwork helped her release deep suppressed emotion that she didn't even know were in there. We also explore the practical functional benefits of breathwork techniques so you can learn how to optimize your breathing day to day and also during your sleep. And hint, it does not include very much breathing through your mouth at all. You will definitely take something away that you can use to improve your life, regulate your emotions, and promote personal growth. If there is something in this episode that you find interesting, please share it with someone who you think can benefit from it, and please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so that you can help to share the show. Welcome, Amy Mason, to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So wonderful to have you on here. I've been following your work for some time now. After actually a friend reached out to me who had a teenage daughter. I think she was about 14 or 15. She was struggling to find a way to regulate her emotions. She was dealing with mental health challenges and negative thought patterns, and they'd literally done everything. Like, they had been to therapy, I don't think they'd tried medication, but they'd done a lot of work to try and find that regulation around her emotions. And she reached out to me to say, hey, I know you've got this podcast. Do you know someone that you think could help us out? We're in Melbourne. What do you think? So I actually reached out to a few of my friends in Melbourne who I trust and I know well. And actually 2 people suggested you as the person that she go and see. So I want to talk to you about that a little bit as a starting point, because your work is so important, and the whole emotional regulation part of it is something that I think more of us need to tap into. Tell me a little bit about what you do and how you help people, say in this situation, who would come to you in this condition.
Yeah, beautiful. So emotional regulation is kind of at the core of what I do. And for people who might not understand what that is, or kind of thinking what is emotional regulation, the way I like to explain it is it's how you're either reacting or responding to life and what's happening around you. And ideally, we want to be responding to everything. We don't want to be reacting. We don't want to be, overreacting to anything. We want to be responding. So that's a little touch point on what emotional regulation is. But with somebody who comes in for something like that, we kind of look at their lifestyle, like what's happening around you. Why are we feeling like this? And then we go inwards. And that's where the breath work comes into it. So I'm an emotional regulation coach, but, probably a good 85% of what I do comes back to breath work. And whether that being functional breath work or breakthrough breath work, like it's just a full scope. And then, figuring out how they're feeling, what's happening in their life will then determine, okay, well, which way do we go? What type of breath work are we tapping into? How can we help you? And it's so incredibly different for everybody. Like there's no, like I don't have like one thing that everybody comes in and then we just do this thing, because it's so different for everybody. So then the outcome is very different. And what we do is completely different, but it all comes back to some kind of breath work, because that is the thing that's going to help you regulate not only your nervous system, but your emotions.
That's great. I think we need to do a deep dive into breath work, because the term breath work now just gets thrown around everywhere. And there's people who have experienced it and obviously know the transformation that can happen with breath work, and just the lifestyle change that can happen with correct breathing. But if we don't know what it is, and you and I probably have, we've been those people who had no idea what breath work was and what it could do, we need someone to break it down for us. And my experience was, I just turned up somewhere and ended up going into a trauma release breathwork session without being aware of anything, thinking that I was just going to be doing a beautiful meditation. Ended up crying for 5 hours afterwards. So that was interesting. But it doesn't always have to be like that. But let's start with that one first. So let's start with maybe the trauma release one, because that's what I think a lot of people believe all of breathwork is at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And funny enough, for some like reason that I am completely unaware of, this is usually where people start. Like this somehow is like how people fall into the breathwork space. It is like a trauma release event, which is, I wouldn't recommend that to be your first point of contact with breathwork, but for some reason, this is where everybody lands. And whether it's an event or a class, or somebody says, you've got to go and do breath work, they somehow end up just doing a breakthrough breath work, like a 3-hour thing. And then, like you just said, go home and cry for 6 hours. Like what just happened? Because it is intense and it can be very deep. And what you experience and why you kind of have these 5-hour crying episodes afterwards is because we have released trauma. We've brought up like emotions or traumas that we have suppressed at some point in our life. And what usually happens is when we store trauma in our body, we hold it in our diaphragm. And over years and over time, what happens, depending on how much trauma we're actually storing, this restricts our breathing. So this is why a lot of people breathe into their chest and not their belly. Right? So we're now breathing into our chest. Most people are mouth breathers, and we can touch on that a little bit later, but they're breathing short and sharp into their chest. So when you go and do a breakthrough session like this, you actually start shifting what's stuck here. And whatever you have suppressed at some point in your life starts to actually release. And that's why you get the tears. That's why you have that full body like shaking and the crying and the hyperventilation and the, some people will scream, some people will laugh. And then the reason that you kind of get home and you're still crying is because you've brought so much to the surface that you've spent say the last 30 years suppressing. It's a lot. And it's not something that you can just be done with in a 2-hour session. Right? That kind of activates it. It brings it upwards, brings it out, but then there's still so much at the surface that we need to process. Like it doesn't just come out and then it's done. Whatever didn't get released is kind of like, okay, we're still here. And that's usually what the tears are representing the 5 to 6 hours later, or the 3 to 4 days after for some people. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I think it's important to really work on what came up, because I think a lot of times that doesn't happen with some breath work sessions that I've seen. And it comes up and it's something that you've been holding back for, like you said, could be 30 years. And you're like, I actually don't want to deal with this because this hurts and it's shit. But again, it's there. You've already done the crying. So now it's time to deal with it and then you can let it go, right? So how do people deal with that then? Is it therapy that they do, or what do you suggest for the next steps are after that massive release of breath work?
Integration is so important. And this is something that we are really big on. Like, we don't do a lot of breakthrough stuff anymore, but when we do, it's a matter of like, we give you steps to go back home and do. And usually that looks like a lot of journaling, rest, and a lot of journaling. And we often will offer journaling prompts, like specific journaling prompts for specific people, and say, go home and sit with this, because that's going to allow you to really, like, release that little bit more that's just kind of stuck here. You don't have to have the conversation. You really don't need to go and see a therapist. You need to sit with yourself and you need to let yourself feel all of these shitty things that we don't want to feel, right? You can't go into something like this and then suppress what's come up, because we're just going to be re-traumatizing ourselves. And this is why a lot of people will do something like this and then go, breathwork's not for me. Didn't like it, won't do it again, because they have re-traumatized themselves. And that's essentially what we're doing. We're bringing up something that we've suppressed, and we've suppressed it for a good reason, right? We don't suppress things if they're easy to move through. We suppress the hard things. We suppress the trauma that's happening in our lives. So when it comes back up, it's not easy to deal with, because if it was, we would have done that already. So the journaling is really, really amazing, and rest, lots of sleep, a nice bath. And then we offer, and I don't know what most other breathwork facilitators do, but we offer, like, I think it's 7 days of full contact. So if you need something, if you need a chat, like, we're there. You just reach out, and whether that's a phone call, whether that's text, whether that's a couple of voice messages, like, we're there to give full support to all of our clients and anybody that comes to, even if it's just a breathwork class, like a standard class that's not breakthrough. Some people will still have a really big release. So the integration for us is so important. And sometimes that just looks like extended coaching. Like, we're here to talk through it with you.
That's brilliant.
If they feel like they need to go and see a therapist, or they have a therapist and they want to kind of extend it with them, great. Like, you also got to kind of lean in and feel and go with whatever's going to be right for you.
I love that. Do you remember your first breakthrough breathwork session?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Tell me about it.
It was same thing, funny enough, like one of my first like proper breathwork experiences. And I went in and was like, right, this is what's bothering me, this is what's annoying me, and this is what I want to deal with. And little did I know that's not how breathwork works, right? And I was almost like completely mortified at the things that came up for me, because it's not what I wanted to deal with. Again, it's not what I wanted to move through. And it's absolutely not what I thought I was going to go into that day. And it was something that I'd suppressed for, a very, very long time. And it was just there at the forefront. And I was honestly like, fuck. Like, it was just, and I was in hysterics, just bawling my absolute eyes out. And, it was very confronting. And I was like, okay, and the funny thing was, I was like, I thought I dealt with this. I knew that there was a little bit of something still there, but for the most part, I was like, it doesn't really, like, it's not a problem for me anymore. And, I'm happy to kind of even open up and be a little bit vulnerable here with this. So I don't speak to my dad, and haven't for going on like 15 years now, I think. And at that point, I think we hadn't spoken in maybe 9 years, 8 or 9 years. And it was fine. It wasn't a problem anymore. But what came up for me. And I was like, this is not it. I was like stressed at work. I wanted to release the stress for work. I didn't want it. And then, same thing. I had to go home and do a really big deep dive, and, wrote out a big letter to my dad, and then I burnt it. And like, it was a whole, like, the day turned into a whole ceremony kind of thing. But that was my first like big experience with breathwork. And that's when I realized, okay, wow, you really have no control over what,
Mm.
like you can't go in and be like, all right, this is what we're dealing with today.
Do you feel like you healed that part of you more once you'd been through that breakthrough session?
Yes and no. It opened up the doors for me. So
Yeah.
after that, I was like, okay, we've got a lot more work here to do than I actually thought. And that allowed me to move in. It was a very slow process because I didn't want to deal with it. And I wasn't open to stepping into that space and dealing with that kind of thing there and then. And at that point, I was still very fresh into this whole like spiritual journey and this like, really deep self-development type of work. So it was very confronting and I was like, oh, I don't know. But that kind of opened up those gates and said, you've got to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't keep pretending like it's okay and pretending like it doesn't matter and pretending like it doesn't bother you anymore because it obviously is.
And it's
And
presenting itself in other ways that you are unaware of. Maybe the stress at work is heightened because of this underlying thing that you hadn't dealt with. My favorite thing about having a podcast like this is that people open up to me really easily, and it's beautiful for me to have those conversations with friends and people who have like followed the journey, and they'll come up and they'll just share so openly really quickly, and I love that because I love deep chats so much. But we were having a conversation with a friend recently around this as well, around her knowing that she had things to deal with, and she's like, I've just got to find the space in order to be able to deal with it. She said, because I know it's going to hurt, but and I don't want to give it the time and energy to deal with it, heal, and acknowledge all of this stuff that I've been pushing down for so long. And I think coming at it from that perspective is really interesting too, because you went into it sort of having no idea that you were about to open this can of worms. But I love the approach that, people realize these days that they probably do have trapped stuff that they need to and should release, and finding that space to do it, not going, I'm just going to like jam this into your life. And for the next 5-6 weeks, you're going to be dealing with these emotions that you've hidden away for so long.
yeah, and like when you're unaware of it, it really does take you by surprise.
Yeah.
You just like I was not aware that I was holding on to this much. Like I act like you. I think it's more so we convince ourselves that we're okay.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
suppressing and we're not allowing ourselves to feel into the things or have the hard conversations. Over time, we convince ourselves that we're okay.
Yeah.
Really not. And life is so busy. So it's easy to forget and it's easy to just keep going and
Yeah.
move into like, you've got work, you've got kids, you've got friends, you've got social commitments, you've got all of these things so that we convince ourselves that we're okay. And that's when everything slowly just gets pushed further. And then something else happens and it comes on top. And it pushes this further down and then this further down and then something else happens. And then slowly but surely, everything just keeps getting pushed further down and down and down. And then you do a breakthrough breathwork session and you're like, oh God.
Mm.
Okay, so that's still there. I did a session maybe 3 months ago, actually, with a beautiful woman who flew over from New Zealand, and she come out of it and was like, that like the thing that had come up for her happened 65 years ago.
Yeah.
She's like, I have not thought about that for 65 years.
Wow.
And it
There you
was
go.
like there, like it wasn't like a little bit there. She's like, it was almost like I was reliving the situation. And so she was like, I have not thought about that at all for probably a good 30 years. Like the
Yeah.
memory wasn't even there anymore.
And it's important for us to say, not like to bring up this, not to scare people, I think is really important, because you're doing it for a reason, to come out the other end renewed and shifted, and perceiving life in a different way, and well, the ultimate being healed from that trauma that you've experienced, right? So yes, sometimes getting out of our comfort zone can be the way to do that, for absolutely sure. What's the actual breath technique that is used? Because I want to talk about functional breathing as well and other softer types of breath work in a minute. But what's the technique of breath that's used for these breakthrough sessions?
It varies depending on what facilitator you're going to and how they've been trained. There is a couple of different techniques, but they all are kind of based around hyperventilation.
Mm.
So, and usually it's not, and I would hope that it's not hyperventilation from like the get-go. The way that I facilitate it is like a really beautiful, gentle, soft breath to kind of allow you to drop in, and then we build it up. We build it up, and then we're in that hyperventilation state. A lot of people will then tap into mouth breathing to really kind of drop you in and push you further into that stress state, if you will. I don't facilitate breakthrough like that at all. I did at one point and I don't anymore. I'm strictly nasal breathing now because I feel like you can still get the most incredible results and the most incredible breakthrough without having to push yourself that little bit further, and then just slowly guide you back down to a slower breath, because it's kind of at that peak in that hyperventilation where you'll have the breakthrough. And then as you slow down your breath, that's when you start to kind of integrate what's just come up, what's happened. And for some people, that is where the breakthrough happens. So it's very different again. Like not everybody's going to have the breakthrough in the peak of the breath. Some people will have it as they slow down. Some people won't have it until they're fully out of it. Like they'll sit up and you'll ask them how they are and how they feel. And that's when they have the breakthrough. So it's very, very different for everybody.
How long do your breakthrough breathwork sessions go for generally?
About an hour.
Yep. And you're not hyperventilate breathing that whole time, obviously. No.
Absolutely not. So 40 to 60 minutes is usually how long they go for. Some people will have a really big, beautiful breakthrough a lot earlier in the piece. Some people will and then if they do, I'll wrap it up at about the 40-minute mark. But some people will only start to kind of tap in at that like 40-minute mark. And if that's the case, then I allow that space to push it out. So sometimes it'll go for 60 minutes, sometimes it'll go for 90 minutes. Again, very dependent on the person. There's no like one way to do it.
Best hour of your life, guys. Best hour of your life. Tell me, like I've seen people's hands claw up in some trauma release breathwork sessions. What is that called? What is that? And yeah, can you explain that, how that works and why that works?
Yeah, so that's called tetany, right? And that's happening because of how you're breathing. And that can actually happen in like not a breakthrough breathwork session. That could happen in just like a general community breathwork class where you're not hyperventilating. So it comes down to the amount of kind of oxygen that you're dumping into your body, really. And so your hands will kind of claw up like this, or they'll kind of come into fists. And this doesn't happen to everybody. It'll happen to some people really severely. I have never experienced it, not once. And I have, in my earlier days of facilitation, tried to push myself because I was like, I want to feel it. Like, why isn't this happening for me? But it's again one of those things that it's dependent on you. Not every single person is going to feel that or have that. Some people have it a lot. Some people will have it this session, but they won't have it this session. So I think that's a really important thing to touch on as well. Like, even if you're doing a breakthrough session and you've got 15 people in the room, you're going to be guiding them through the same style of breath work, but they're all going to be feeling something incredibly different. Physically, emotionally, like absolutely everything is going to be so different for each person in that space, even though they're doing the same breathwork technique. You might get 6 people that get really hardcore tetany and 4 that absolutely get nothing and don't feel anything in their hands at all.
And so it's not harmful. It's not dangerous.
Not at all. It is something that happens in the breath work. And then as you start to slow down your breath and come back to your natural breath, it just subsides. And, you can come out of it and kind of sit up from the session and your hands will still kind of, be a little bit tingly and kind of a little bit crampy. We just extend our exhales, really slow down the breath, and then your hands will come back. So that's another really beautiful point, actually. Like everything that you feel in the breathwork session is temporary. It's just happening in that moment. And this is where I say to people, you know, like if you are going into that breakthrough session, you want to breathe through the resistance, because often that's where the breakthrough happens, but it's safe. Like what you're feeling in this moment is okay. As soon as we slow our breath down, we come back to our natural breath, you're going to hopefully be feeling a little bit lighter than you were beforehand. Like you're not going to be feeling the tetany, you're not going to be feeling the uncomfortableness, because some people can also get tetany like in their mouth. So their mouth will cramp up a little bit, especially if they're doing really hardcore mouth breathing. Or you can get it in your feet, behind your knees can get really tingly, shows up in your body very differently for everybody.
Yeah, it's great to know everything is temporary when it comes to breath work. Actually, in life too, really, isn't it? Everything is temporary. Yeah, incredible. All right, so I hope we haven't scared too many people off breath work, but it just is such a great way to really look at things that, like we have said, that you've suppressed for a long time, and break through those and move on and be able to heal beyond past traumas and issues and experiences that have been in your life and you haven't thought about for a very, very, very long time, or perhaps it was even recently. So it's a brilliant thing to understand and be able to jump into whenever you need it. I do want to know about more day-to-day breathing and the lighter breath work functionality too, because every breath keeps us alive and we almost take it for granted, but we all need to know that there are correct ways to breathe. And the single most important advice. So when I was 17, 18, 19, around that age, I started experiencing anxiety and I went to a hypnotherapist and he actually taught me how to breathe. And it was the best advice I have ever received in my life. And it took him about 10 seconds to explain it to me. And now I don't, if something arises and I'm feeling anxious and I need to calm myself down, I convert to this way of breathing by making sure I'm not breathing through my chest and inhaling and using my diaphragm and which I'm sure you're going to explain to us in a moment. But it was such amazing advice that I've passed on to so many other people. We all need to know that there are correct ways of breathing to keep our nervous system regulated and just to be functioning at our best person. So explain to me the best way to breathe day to day.
Day to day, beautiful. This is one of my favorite conversations to have. So a lot of what I do is based around functional breath work. Like I said earlier, we don't do a lot of the breakthrough stuff much anymore because the most part of me is just like, this is so important. And if you're not breathing correctly day to day, the breakthrough stuff is almost irrelevant. Like you want to kind of like get this under wraps, get this going really, really well, learn how to breathe properly, and then tap into the breakthrough stuff. So day-to-day breathing, dysfunctional breathing looks like breathing into your chest. So short, shallow, sharp breath into your chest only, and often in and out of your mouth. So majority of the population are breathing in and out of their mouth, and this is absolutely not how we should be breathing ever at any point in our lives. The way to breathe correctly is in through your nose, and you want to drop your breath into the depths of your belly. So really push past your chest into your belly and then gently let that fill up and rise into your chest. And then invite a really beautiful, gentle exhale from there. So we really want to focus on dropping our breath past our chest and allowing really beautiful, deep, slow breaths. So when most of my clients come to work with me, they are like, their natural breath is about 1.5 to 2 seconds. How we should be breathing is 5.5 seconds on the inhale, 5.5 seconds on the exhale. And I have never met somebody that's at that point in their life, ever. Like you can get there, but every time I meet somebody, it's usually really short, really sharp, shallow chest breathing. And side effects of dysfunctional breathing, fun fact for you, are stress, anxiety, and depression. So often, most people that have these things go on medication for anxiety to be, for example, don't actually have anxiety. They just have side effects because they're not breathing correctly. And if they, in fact, corrected their breathing, they wouldn't experience anxiety anymore.
Because that feeling of anxiety can spiral, right? If you're not breathing properly, if you drink a coffee and it triggers you to believing that you have anxious feelings, and then you end up being anxious for the whole entire day, which is the reason why I don't drink coffee anymore, because that happens to me. But it's so true, isn't it? So true.
Yeah. And often what happens, like our breath is really one of those beautiful things. Like it is an automatic thing that we do without thinking, but it is also like the only thing that we do within our body automatically that we can manipulate, that we can change. Like we can't change the way our liver is functioning. We can't change how our heart is beating, like, you know, day to day, right? But we can change our breath. We have full control over that when we want it and when we need it. So when you are experiencing something like anxiety and you notice, like you'll notice that your breath starts getting a lot shorter, a lot sharper, and you are really focused here. And you kind of almost feel like you're having a heart attack, right? And your heart's pumping, your chest is beating. If you don't know any better, you're going to get stuck there. And because you're having that feeling, you're going to start breathing deeper, but quicker. You're going to start going. So essentially, you're hyperventilating and you're going to make it worse. And this is where the vicious cycle comes into it, right? And it then becomes really, really difficult to pull yourself out of that situation. But when you know better, you can do better. So when you notice that happening, all you need to do is focus on slowing your breath down. If you just spend 30 seconds really focusing on taking beautiful, slow inhales through your nose, dropping it into your belly, gentle exhales, that will pass relatively quickly. You know, sometimes it'll just take 30 seconds. Sometimes it might take 3 minutes to sit with your breath. But if you actually sit with it, give it the attention it deserves, that feeling of anxiety and that like panic attack or anxiety attack will subside.
A perfect example of this is when, well, for those who have been in an ice bath, and when you get in and you're like, oh my God, and you're like you said, you're hyperventilating. I did breathwork cold plunge recently, and the facilitator guided us through how to breathe as soon as we jumped in, and it was so interesting because he, you know, plugged someone up to a heart monitor, and we watched the breathing change and the heart rate change as they jumped in, and how it slowed, and it was really beautifully scientifically explained to us. But slowing the breath down in those first like 25-30 seconds of getting into an ice bath is exactly like being in a high pressure situation, isn't it? It's just like, okay, this high pressure situation has occurred. Your breathing changes, your reaction changes. But being in that environment and learning in a cold plunge, in an ice bath, and learning how to slow your breath in a stressful state can really help us in life, can't it?
Yeah, well, I do a lot of ice baths with my clients, and this is the exact reason I do it, right? There's so many benefits to doing cold therapy and getting into an ice bath. But the main reason that I do it, one is for mental resilience, but two, to teach you that you have full control. And most things are mind over matter. An ice bath, for the most part, is not going to hurt you, right? But if you get in, you start hyperventilating. If you just hyperventilate, that's going to be the worst 3 minutes of your fucking life.
Yeah.
It's horrific. Like, and it's not going to get any better at all. But if you get in, allow your body, like, notice the shift in your body, notice your breath changing, notice the hyperventilation, and then take full control of that, slow it down. Within 45 seconds, you've regulated your nervous system, you've regulated your emotions, you've regulated your mind, and now you can sit for the full 3 minutes, and it's not going to be awful. It's not easy. Like, it's still quite hard to get to that 3 minute mark, but it's a lot more bearable. And you can actually sit there in the stillness and you have just rewritten your story, essentially, right? And that plays into our lives. And this is what I do. So a lot of my clients come to me because they're suffering from really bad stress and anxiety. And this is the reason I do this with them, to teach them that you actually have control over the situation. You have control over your reactions, and you're more powerful than you think you actually are. And when you see that and you do it and you experience, you kind of go, oh, I actually am, like, I am strong and I can do hard things and I can control my breath and I can control my reactions. Like, it's a really beautiful thing, right? And ice baths, like, they're never fun. I've been doing them for a very long time, and I don't think I have ever said, yeah, keen, let's jump in. Like, I always look at it and go, oh, again, here we are again. Like, they're not, it's not a fun thing, because for
It's
that,
fun when you get out.
when you get right. The last 10 seconds is great.
Yeah.
But there's always that mental block when you go to get in, because you know it's going to be hard. You know it's going to be difficult, but then you sit in it, you just regulate, you take control of your breath, you take control of your mind, and you're like, what a great reminder of how much control I actually have over my entire being.
So true. So true. I did promise myself I was going to do an ice bath today, because I have not done one in about a year. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I would text you afterwards and I will let you know that I did it straight after this, in fact. Now, I want to talk about breathing in our sleep, because when I was a kid, I'd like wake up with like crusty drool on the side of my face. And that is an obvious sign that I was sleeping with my mouth wide open. I don't do that anymore. I didn't even train myself, but I definitely sleep with my mouth closed and I breathe through my nose, which is, I think, good. So tell me about how we should sleep while we're breathing and how we can actually train ourselves in that way as well.
Yeah. So again, most people, when they do sleep, they're breathing in and out of their mouth, because that's how they breathe all day, every day. So like, they don't know any different. Their body doesn't know any different at this point. So that's just how they're breathing kind of round the clock. But we are not designed to breathe in and out of our mouth. So the reason most people wake up in the middle of the night parched is because they're breathing in and out of their mouth. And when we're doing that, we're expelling, I think it's like an additional 40% of moisture that we would normally retain if we were just breathing through our nose when we were sleeping. It's also the reason most people toss and turn and get up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night, because you're not actually allowing yourself to drop into that really beautiful, deep, like REM sleep, right? So when we breathe through our nose, all of that kind of gets pushed to the side. You're retaining that moisture. So you're not going to wake up feeling thirsty. You're allowing yourself to drop into that like beautiful deep sleep. So you're not tossing and turning. You don't have to wake up feeling like you need to go to the toilet, and you actually wake up a lot more restful. Now, the reason some people who breathe in and out of their nose throughout the day, but still breathe through their mouth while they're sleeping, even if they don't think that they do, a lot of people do, is because, you know, sometimes your tongue will drop into the back of your throat a little bit. And that kind of just puts pressure on your muscles in your mouth. So your mouth will open a little bit. And then we just start breathing through our mouth without even noticing. So a big thing that I recommend to a lot of people, almost everybody, is mouth taping when you sleep. And I've been doing this for, gosh, I think like 3 or 4 years now. Probably closer to 4 years, every single night without fail. And if I run out of tape or I go away and I forget it or something like that, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, good Lord. Like, you feel the difference instantly. Like, it's such a quick thing to shift. Mouth taping is huge, even for your kids. Like, everybody should be mouth taping, because it just fully stops any chance that you're going to be breathing through your mouth. You're going to feel better. You're going to feel more rested, because we should only be breathing in and out of our nose, especially while we sleep, because this is when we're like, our body's doing like the big, deep clean, and we're resting and we are restoring all of the things, right?
So sexy it must look.
Oh my God. I literally like tape up my husband, and then I tape up me, and I'm good. Babe, gone are the days of, actually, to be fair, we were both mouth taping before we met.
Yeah, I love it.
Never even had like that sexy stage. It was just tape. Do you like, this is
Headphones, mouth tape, like, yeah, all the things. Eye mask.
Yeah.
See no evil, hear no evil, breathe no evil. Love it.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But so in and out of your nose is the only way. And, you know, there's a lot of like mouth tape companies out there now, like selling mouth tape, and that's great. If you've got the budget for that and you want it, go for it. But you really don't need to spend much money. Go to the chemist. I think it's a 3M tape, like that paper tape that they use when you get like a blood test to put the little cotton balls on your arm. A roll of that is like $3 and it'll probably last you about 6 months.
Yeah, amazing.
It's straight across your mouth, and if that freaks you out, like the fact that you're going to be taping your mouth when you sleep, start during the day. Like when you sit down to read a book, put the tape over your mouth. If you're cooking dinner or you're like on your computer working and you don't need to be on a, Zoom call or something and you don't need to talk to anybody, tape your mouth and get comfortable with breathing through your nose, because it is a very uncomfortable thing if you're used to breathing in and out of your mouth.
Mm. And I think it's obviously helpful to train ourselves, but also to know why we're doing it. So I love that you've shared all of that here today. It's so, so interesting what you do. Tell me about Life with Purpose and your platform that you have created. It's with your husband, right?
Yeah. So Life with Purpose is our business and our community, really. So that we've had the business for, I think it's 2.5 years now. We rebranded from Flow State Breathwork to Life with Purpose maybe 3 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago now. So Life with Purpose is still quite fresh. And we changed that because we wanted kind of like a bigger umbrella to work under. We didn't want to just solely be breathwork, because a lot of what we do is lifestyle based. So we shifted that to kind of just, allow more people to come in and allow us to help more people. But we've recently created a online platform that's called the Regulation Academy to give people access to what they need without having to worry about going to classes or finding that additional time. Like, it's just in your pocket, it's ready to go. Everything that you need is in there. And that's been really beautiful. We decided we wanted to do that at the start of last year. And we launched that, I think maybe 4 months ago, about the same time that we launched Life with Purpose, actually. I think I launched them at the exact same time. And that's been really amazing because, as much as going to classes are great and doing all of the things, sometimes we just don't have that time luxury. And I don't feel like that should stop anybody from getting the information that they need and doing the practices that can help them.
Agreed. Yeah. And being able to bring it into your lifestyle and do it daily if you need to is key to, making sure that repetition and consistency happens across your lifetime. So I love that you do that. And I want to be able to share that with everyone. So we'll share the links in the show notes if you want to learn more. And if you're in Melbourne, go down and experience Amy in person. If you're not, there's online opportunities as well. Now, I always ask everyone this question, and I have let you know, and you do know the title of the podcast, but tell me, Amy, what's something that you once heard that you couldn't unhear?
So I have had this in the back of my mind since you mentioned it before we started, and I was like, oh, what is it going to be? And there's a few things, but I think I want to share like the most recent thing that kind of happened, like that I heard, and I was like, oh my God. And this only happened a week and a half ago. So last Monday, I attended a business event, and the lady presenting said, your to-do list will never be done, but your life will be. And I was like, oh, okay.
So true, isn't it?
This will never be done, but your life will be. And like, where are you not living because you're just so concerned with ticking the boxes and getting the things done? And, and I was like, oh my God, this is like, that was probably the most powerful line that I've heard in a very long time, to be honest.
Yeah. I actually really love that one because my to-do list is rather large at the moment and it's really pissing me off. So I'm not going to take it too seriously. Okay.
We've got to live. We've got to live in amongst all of the things, and they'll still be there tomorrow. They'll still be there the next day. Like, they'll get done when they need to get done. But you got to live.
Exactly. I love that so much. Amy, thank you so much for your time today. Jumping into breathwork is so important and understanding it. Like I always say to everyone, if you And I said it before, if you know why you're doing something, it makes so much sense for you to continue to do it and give it a go from the start. So thank you so much for explaining that so beautifully. Thank you for helping change people's lives and continuing to do what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Beautiful. Thanks, Amy. Thanks for listening to the show. What did you think? And what did you feel? Let us know by leaving me a message on the Things You Can't Unhear Instagram community page. And if you can, give us some ratings love on your favourite listening platform.